She's at the west gate again, my king. Ronald Sedge said it the way he said everything that winter, flat, half apologetic, the voice of a man who had carried too much bad news to be frightened of a little more. Snow was coming off his shoulders in wet clumps onto my floor. Behind him, the hall doors stood open on a courtyard gone blue with cold. Same woman. Same woman, Larrowfield. She's brought Crocs again. Then she can carry them back down again. She's been standing there since the bell. Then she's a fool as well as a beggar. I did not look up from the map I had been failing to read for an hour. Turn her back, Ronald. He did not move at once, which was his way of arguing with me, and then he went, which was his way of losing. I heard the gate chain sing out in the cold. I did not go to the window. I want that written down plainly, because everything I did afterward was an apology for it. The first time Eloan Ashby stood in my snow, I did not so much as look at her. 2 winters had gone since the rising. People in the low valleys still called it the Banner Rising, as though it had been a piece of pageantry, a season of flags. In the Highkeld we did not call it anything. We had a stone in the yard with names cut into it, 41 of them, and when a man wanted to speak of the war, he went and stood in front of that stone and said nothing for a while, and everyone understood him. I had one. That is the part no one tells you about properly. I had one at Thistlegate on a morning so cold the blood froze before it reached the ground, and I had ridden back up to my own hold at the head of my own pack, and I had not been able to call my wolf since. 2 years. He was in me. I felt him the way you feel a room on the other side of a wall, but he would not come when I reached for him. Some nights I stood in the yard by that stone with my hands open at my sides, and called him like a man calling a dog into a storm, and nothing came back but my own breath. An alpha king who cannot shift is a rumor waiting to be a rebellion. So I told nobody, and I ruled with my voice and my hands and my temper, and I watched the north the way you watch a dog that has bitten once. And I kept the boy. His name was Avon. He was 4 years old that winter, going on 5. His father had been Halric Bray, who had put the banners up and made his stand at Thistlegate and died there under my own hand, and his mother had gone into the burning of the holdfast that same night and had not come out. Everything the boy owned in the world had ended inside a single hour, and afterward my men found him sitting in a cart at the Larrow fairground with his hands folded in his lap, wide awake, perfectly quiet. He had been perfectly quiet ever since. Not sulking, not frightened. You could take him to the kitchens and he would eat. You could give him a wooden horse and he would play with it seriously, like a clerk. He simply did not use words. 2 years and my healers had put their hands on his throat and found nothing wrong, and the old woman who kept my kitchen said it was grief and would pass, and it did not pass. Every morning I saw him at the same window on the stair, the one that looks down over the west gate, kneeling on the sill with his chin on his forearms, watching the road. Every morning I told myself I would find some way to speak to him that day. Every morning the council found me first. They found me that same afternoon in the long room, with Ambrose Kit at the head of them. Kit had been first warden of the Highkeld since my father's time. He had a beautiful voice and no hurry in him at all, and he had kept the kingdom's ledgers through 2 bad harvests and a war, and I have never met a man who did more damage while being technically correct. The Carn Packs have sent their terms for the Long Night Council, he said. They will renew the peace for another 9 years. Good. They ask for a surety. They can have grain, they can have the past tolls. They ask for the boy. The fire popped. Nobody in that room moved. Say the rest of it, I said. The child is Halric Bray's blood and the last living claim to the Larrow banners. Kit folded his hands. The Carn wish him fostered in the north until he comes of age. It is not an insult, my king. It is the ordinary shape of a peace. He would be raised well. He would be raised far away from anyone who might one day put a banner in his hand. He is 4. He will not always be 4. That is precisely their point. Someone down the table said it would be an act of statesmanship. Someone else said the valleys would settle once they saw the crown was not sheltering a claim. Kit let them talk, because a man like Kit never carries a thing himself if he can get other men to carry it for him, and then he said the sentence he had come to say. If the council reaches the long night without an answer, my king, the Karn will read your silence as a refusal, and we will be paying for that refusal with men. Again, I looked down the table at all of them and thought about the stone in the yard with 41 names on it, and about a boy kneeling on a window ledge watching a road nobody came up. Bring it before the full council at the long night, I said. I will give my answer there. It was not courage. It was 11 days of delay dressed up as a decision, and Kit bowed as though I had given him exactly what he wanted, because I had. She came back 6 days later. I heard about it from the kitchens before I heard about it from my captain, which tells you how a hold really works. The woman from Larrowfield was at the west gate. She had come up the whole switchback road on foot in weather that had turned 3 carters back. She had 2 crocks of honey in a shoulder basket, and she was asking again to be allowed to see the king's ward. That is what stopped me, not the honey, the asking. I went down myself. I told myself it was to end the nuisance. She was standing just inside the outer arch with the snow going sideways past her, and she did not look up at the sound of my boots because she was busy. She had set the basket down and was crouched over it, packing straw back around the crocks with her bare hands so they would not crack in the cold. Her cloak was good wool and had been mended at the shoulder twice, neatly, by someone who did not care whether the mending showed. Her hands were red to the wrist and marked all over with small old burns. Then she stood up. I want to be careful here because I have heard men in my hall tell this part of their lives badly, all thunder and destiny as though a bond were a blow to the head. It was not like that. It was quieter and far stranger. She opened her mouth to speak, and for a half-beat before the sound came I knew the word she was going to say. Not guessed. Knew, the way you know the next note of a song you were sung as a child. My king, she said. And I stood there in my own gateway like a boy who has lost his place in a lesson, because I had heard it twice. You're the honey keeper, I said. Aloan Ashby, Larrowfield. She dipped her head not deeply. I've asked at your gate twice now, my king. I'd rather ask you since you're here. Ask then. Let me see the boy, an hour. In your kitchens, with your women standing over me if that's how you want it. Again the half-beat, again her voice arriving where I already was. I don't want to take him anywhere. I only want him to see somebody he's seen before. He's seen 100 people. Not since, she said it plainly without weighting it. He's seen 100 people since, my king, and it hasn't done him any good, has it? I've heard he doesn't speak. The wind came through the arch. Behind her, out on the road, the light was already going. Who are you to him? I asked. Nobody, she said. I held him for an hour. Explain that. The night the banners went up, I had a stall at the Larrow Fair, wax and honey and candles, same as every autumn. His mother came through the crowd with him on her hip and everything was already going wrong. Men shouting at the crossroads, someone had set the toll house alight. She knew me. Not well. Well enough to buy candles from me at 3 fairs. Her breath smoked. She put him in my arms and said she was going to find his father and she'd be an hour, and I said yes, of course, and she went. And I stood there with him and I couldn't put him down, so I walked him up and down behind the stall and I sang at him, badly, and he fell asleep against my neck. And then it was 2 hours, and then it was dark, and then your riders came through the fairground and took him off me because he was Howrick Bray's son and I was nobody, and I let them. I stood there in the mud and I let them. She stopped. She did not cry. She looked at me the way a woman looks at a shelf that is too high for her. I have thought about that every night for 2 winters, she said. So, an hour, that's all I'm asking for. And I said no. I have gone back over it many times since, and I can tell you exactly why I said it, and the reasons are all good ones, and they are all worth nothing. I had 11 days before I stood in front of my full council and told them whether I would hand that child north or refuse and pay for it. If I let a woman from a valley that had raised braised banners into my kitchens to sit with the boy, Kit would have it in a report before supper. Some men in my own council would call it sentiment. The Carn would call it worse. And I had 41 names on a stone in my yard, and I could not put more there because a child had been sung to. "You'll not see him," I said, "not this winter." She took that the way you take a door shutting. No pleading, no argument. She bent and picked up the basket, and then she stopped and set one of the crocks down on the mounting block just inside the arch. "That's the summer one," she said. "The dark comes later in the year and it's stronger. Children don't like the strong one." She pulled her hood up. "He can have it or you can throw it in the yard, my king, that's your business. But it's not a bribe and I'd thank you not to have it thrown after me." "Mistress Ashby." "I'll come again," she said. Half a beat ahead of her, I already knew she would. "It's a long walk, but I've nothing much to do in the cold." Then she went out under the arch into the snow, and I stood in my own gateway and watched a woman walk down a mountain road in weather I would not have sent a rider into. And I did not call after her, and I have never in my life been less pleased with myself than I was in that quarter of an hour. I had the crock brought in. I meant ascended to the kitchens. Avon was on the stair. He had come down from his window. He must have watched the whole of it from up there. The gate, the snow, the woman crouched over her basket, and he was standing 4 steps up with his hand on the rail, and he was looking at the crock in my hands the way a starving man looks at bread. "It's honey," I said like an idiot. "From the valley." He came down the last 4 steps and held out both arms, and I gave it to him, and he took it away with him. He carried it to the kitchens and he carried it back. He had it at supper. He took it to bed with him and slept with his arms around it under the blanket, and when the old woman tried to lift it away he woke and made a sound in his throat, no word, only a sound, and she left it where it was and came and told me, badly frightened, that the ward had made a noise. That was the first noise anyone had heard out of him in 2 years, and it was over a clay crock of honey, and I sat by my fire that night and thought. She held him for 1 hour. 1 hour, 2 winters ago, in the mud behind a market stall, and I had turned her out of my gate twice. 4 nights later the boy was gone. The alarm came before dawn, a door left open on the lower yard, snow blown in across the flags in a long white tongue, the old woman with her hands over her mouth. His bed was empty. The crock was gone with him. Ronald had the gatemen up and the torches lit before I was down the stairs, and it was Ronald who found the tracks, small, unhurried, going out through the drover's gap in the wall, over the stubble field and down. Down the switchback, down towards the orchards. "He's 4, Ronald said. 4 in the dark." "Get me a horse," I said, and my voice came out of me strangely, because for the first time in 2 years something under my ribs had lifted its head and was listening. The switchback road down from the Highkeld is 4 miles of nothing but wind. In summer it is a pleasant ride. That morning the drifts were up over the horse's knees on the turns, and the sky in the east was the color of a bruise, and I sat in my saddle counting the hours since the old woman had last looked in on him. 6. He had 6 hours start on us in the dark in that. "Spread the men at the orchard wall," I told Ronald. "Every ditch, every wood stack. He's small enough to be in any of them. And if he's off the road." I did not answer him, because the answer was that a boy of 4 who goes off the road in that weather is not found by men, he is found by the thaw. Larrowfield sits in a fold of the valley under the crag, all orchards and low stone walls and lanes that go nowhere in particular. It had raised braised banners 2 winters back. Some of those walls still had the black scorch on them from my own men. We came down into the lanes at first light with our torches guttering, and the people came out into their doorways in whatever they had slept in, and stood there and watched us pass, and said nothing at all. They had watched the king's riders come down that road before. I made them a promise from my horse in the middle of the lane, which is not how a king is supposed to do anything. My ward is out in this, I said. 4 years old, dark coat, no gloves. He is carrying a honey crock. Any door he knocked on last night, I want to know it, and I swear on the stone in my yard that no one is answerable for opening to him. An old man leaning on his gate said, "Try the Ashby ground, my lord. Bees are up the top lane." "Why there?" He looked at me the very old look at the very stupid. Because it's where he'd go. The Ashby ground was a half-acre of hillside above the orchards, an old cottage with a mended roof, a wax shed, and rows of straw skeps up under the wall on their stands, each one with a stone on top and a cap of snow. In summer, I suppose it hums. That morning it was the quietest place I have ever stood in. The door of the wax shed was open a hand's breadth. Ronald had his hand up to hold the men back before I said anything, and I went across the yard alone, and I put my shoulder to the door and pushed it slowly, and the smell came out at me, wax and smoke and something sweet and dusty, a smell like the inside of a church in a country where people are happy. She was sitting on the floor against the far wall with her cloak spread open around her, and the boy was inside the cloak, asleep, jammed into the crook of her arm with his face against her collarbone, and the crock held tight against his chest between them. Her free hand was flat on his back. There was a lantern burning down beside them and a stub of candle beside that, so she had been sitting there a long while and had not wanted to move to fetch more light. She looked up at me. She did not get to her feet. She could not have without waking him, and she was not going to. "He knocked on my door at 3 in the morning, she said very quietly. "He's not hurt. His feet are cold, that's all. I've had them against me since." I got down on my heels in the doorway with the snow blowing in past my back. My hands were shaking. I put them on my knees so she would not see it, and she saw it. "You should have sent word," I said. "To where? Up that road in the dark." She shook her head once. "I'd have had to leave him or take him, and I wasn't leaving him, and I wasn't dragging him back up a mountain at 3 in the morning to a man who wouldn't have me at his gate." A pause. "I knew you'd come by morning. I'd have started up myself at first light if you hadn't. I'm not a fool, my king. I know what it looks like, a Larrowfield woman with the king's ward in her arms." "It looks like the only warm room he's been in since Thistlegate," I said. That was not a kingly thing to say. It came out of me before I had it approved. She looked at me for a moment with something moving behind her face, and then she looked down at the top of his head. "He walked 4 miles in the dark," she said, "for this." She tapped the crock with one finger. "He'd finished it. He wanted more. He wanted you. He wanted the honey." "Mistress Ashby," I said it flatly. "He has not spoken in 2 years. He has a hold full of servants who would carry him about on a cushion. He went out of a locked gate in a blizzard and walked 4 miles down a mountain to sit on your floor. Don't be modest at me. I haven't slept." And she laughed. Once, low, half a breath, and stopped herself at once because of the boy, and pressed her mouth shut, and her eyes above her hand were bright and appalled at herself, and something in my chest that had been standing to attention for 2 years quietly sat down. I have tried since to find the words for what happened to me in that shed, and they are all too big. It was not thunder. I have said that already. It was the plainest thing in the world. I looked at a woman sitting on a cold floor with her legs gone numb under a sleeping child, and I understood that I already knew her, the way you know your own hands in the dark, and that I had known her since the gate, and that some part of me had been going half a beat ahead of her voice for a fortnight, and I had been calling it irritation. And under my ribs, for the first time since the morning at Thistlegate, my wolf lifted his head. He did not come. He did not rise. He only lifted his head once, the way a dog does at a footstep it recognizes, and then he was quiet again, but he had heard something, and I sat back on my heels in that doorway and could not speak for a moment. "My king," she said. Nothing, I stood. Give him to me. You've been sat on stone half the night. He'll wake. Then he wakes. She let me take him. I got my arms under him and lifted, and he did not wake. He only turned his face and got a fistful of my collar, and the crock came with him, and I stood in the wax shed with my father's grandson's murderer's son asleep on my shoulder, which is a knot I have never been able to untie and have stopped trying to. Eloin got up off the floor in stages, holding the wall, hissing at her own feet. Don't say it, she said. I wasn't going to. You were going to say I should have moved. I was going to say, I said, that I have been wrong at my own gate twice, and that I would like to see the hives. She looked at me sideways, then she went and got her boots. She walked me up the row while Ronald took the boy to the horses and wrapped him in 3 cloaks and stood over him like a bad-tempered wall. There were 9 skeps on the stands and 4 more overturned in the grass at the end of the row, empty, their straw gone gray. 13, I said, now 9. Now 9. What happened to 4? The winter after the rising happened to 4. She said it without any weight at all, which is how the valley people say the worst things. There was no fair that autumn. Your Ritz had the crossroads shut and nobody was traveling, so there was no selling. So there was no sugar to feed them through the cold, and there was no money to buy sugar with, and you can't feed 9 and 13 both. So I fed 9. She put her hand flat on the top stone of the nearest skep. You choose. That's the whole of beekeeping, my king. You choose which ones you can carry, and you do it in October, and then you live with it till April. I stood in the snow and thought about a council table. And the ones you carried, I said, what do you do for them? Everything, she shrugged. Wrap them, sit up with them in the hard frosts, feed them out of my own crocks when it comes to it, which is why I've less to sell each spring than I ought, which is why my roof's mended and not new. She glanced at me. You want to know why I walked up your road twice? I want to know why you walked up my road twice. Because I put him down, she said. I waited. His mother put him in my arms and said an hour. And when your riders came, I gave him up, because they were armed and I was a woman with a stall, and it was the sensible thing, and I have never once been able to make that sound like enough. She looked away up the row of hives. You can't go back and be braver, my king. There's no doing it again. All you can do is the next thing that's in front of you, and for 2 years the next thing in front of me has been 4 miles up a mountain and behind a gate that wouldn't open. She wiped her nose on the back of her wrist, entirely unromantic. So, that's my confession. I didn't come up for a king. I came up for a boy I put down. You'll not have to come up again, I said. Her face closed. Meaning what? Meaning you'll be at my gate at the long night and it will be open, I said, and meaning I am about to make a great deal of trouble for both of us. How soon can you leave the hives? She stared at me. 11 days, she said slowly. I can leave them 11 days in the frost if I wrap them properly. Why? Because I need to know what he does when he's near you, I said, and I need to know it before I stand in front of my council. Bring your wrappings. Bring your wax if you've work to do. I'm not asking you to sit idle in a hold and be looked at. Ronald will send a cart down. My king, she had gone quite still. You told me no twice, in front of your own gate men. What's changed in 5 days? I could have told her the truth in that yard. I want that written down too. I stood there with the whole of it in my mouth. You are my mate, and I have known it since the gate, and my wolf lifted his head for you this morning after 2 years of silence, and I did not say it, because a woman who has just told you she gave a child up under armed men does not need a king informing her that destiny has an opinion about her. She needed a cart and a fire and somebody to say you were not a coward. Everything else could wait its turn. A child walked 4 miles for you, I said. That's changed. She let it stand. She was too tired to push, and I think, looking back, she knew there was more and let me keep it, which was a kindness I did not deserve at the time. 11 days, she said. And I'm not sitting at any high table. You'll sit where you like. I'll sit in the kitchen, she said, where the boy is, and went to wrap her hives. We rode back up at noon with the boy in front of me on the saddle, awake now, the crock in his lap, watching the road go by with that solemn clerk's face of his. Halfway up the switchback, he leaned back against my chest and stayed there, and I rode the last 2 miles like a man carrying a full cup up a stair. Kit was waiting in the lower yard. He had the whole thing already, the open gate, the missing ward, the riders down to Larrowfield, the woman. He had it before I was out of the saddle, and he stood with his hands folded in his sleeves, and his beautiful voice pitched exactly low enough that the gate men could still hear every word. "Thank the moon he's safe," he said, "and the Ashby woman brings him back herself. That is very fortunate." "She didn't bring him back, I fetched him." "Of course," a small bow. "May I ask what the cart is for?" "She's coming up till the long night." The pause he left was a work of craftsmanship. "My king," he said, "I will say this once and then I will say nothing further, because I have served 3 of your house and I have never yet had to be told twice. In 11 days you will stand in front of the full council and every witness the Carn packs care to send, and you will be asked whether you are sheltering Howrick Bray's claim. On that day the child will be in the hall, and so, apparently, will a woman from the valley that raised Bray's banners, brought up to this hold by your own cart, at your own word, in a week when you would not open your gate to your own tax riders." He let that settle. "I do not say she is anything but what she seems. I say only that I could stand up at that council and make it look like a great deal, and I am the man who likes you." He was right, that was the loathsome part. He was entirely right. "Then I'll have to be very convincing," I said. "Convincing," he smiled small and sad. "You are a king who won a war and cannot be seen to have a soft place. Forgive me. That is not a criticism, it is a description." "Was there anything else, First Warden?" "Only the tally of the Carn escort," he said, all business again. 19 riders, arriving the 9th day. And I have taken the liberty of preparing the surety writ, so that if your answer is yes, there is no fumbling with clerks in front of them. Prepare what you like. Naturally, if your answer is no, I shall burn it." He bowed and went. I stood in the yard with my son. I had better say it plainly, because I was already thinking it by then, and it took me another 6 days to admit it, with the boy holding my hand and a clay crock under his arm, and I watched Ambrose Kit walk back into my hall with a writ already drawn, and I thought, he wrote it before he asked me. That was the thing I did not chase down. 9 days later it very nearly cost me everything. She came up on the 3rd day with a cart full of wax, 2 lidded pails, a spare cloak, and the flat expression of a woman who expects to be sent home again by supper. The gate men let her through without a word from me. That is a thing about a hold. They had watched me turn her out twice in the snow, and they had watched me ride down a mountain at dawn and come back with the boy asleep on my shoulder, and they had drawn their own conclusions and were ahead of me. Ronal had the cart into the lower yard, and her pails carried in before she could argue about carrying them herself. "Where do you want me?" she said. "The east kitchen has a good hearth, and nobody uses the end of it." "That's not what I asked, my king. Where do you want me, in front of people or out of the way?" "In the kitchen," I said. "Where the boy is." "Good," she said, and went. And by evening she had the trestle at the end of the east kitchen covered in wax and wick cord, and had put the old woman's back up twice. And Avon was sitting on the bench beside her with his legs swinging, sorting wick lengths into piles by size, wholly absorbed, like a small tax clerk who had at last been given work suited to his abilities. I stood in the doorway for a while and neither of them noticed me, and I found I did not mind at all. Here is what I learned in those 11 days, and I learned it in the doorway of a kitchen, which is where kings learn everything worth knowing. He was not silent. He was quiet, which is a different thing, and no one had been near enough to hear the difference. Around her he made small sounds, a hum when the wick pile went wrong, a click of the tongue copied straight off her, a breath of laughter through the nose when she burned her thumb and said something under her own breath about the moon and all its works. He had opinions. He expressed them by putting a hand flat on her wrist to stop her, or by taking a candle out of her fingers and turning it round the right way and giving it back. And she talked to him the entire time. Not brightly, not in that dreadful sing-song people use on children. She talked to him the way you talk to a man helping you with a job. That one's short, put it in the short pile. No, that's the middle pile, look at it. Yes, there. You're better at this than I am, and I've done it 11 years. On the fourth night I came in late, after the last of the day's arguing, and found her banking the kitchen fire down, and the boy asleep on the bench with his head on her folded cloak. He won't go up, she said. I've tried twice. Leave him, Ronald will carry him. Ronald will drop him. Ronald has carried me off a battlefield. That's how I know he'll drop him. I sat down on the other end of the bench, which is not a thing an alpha king does in his own east kitchen at midnight, and she gave me one flat look and did not remark on it and went on with the fire. He made a noise today, she said, a proper one. Two sounds joined. What did it sound like? Like the beginning of a word he decided against. She set the poker down. My king, I've been thinking about it. Everyone in this hold has been waiting 2 years for him to speak, and he knows it. He walks into a room and 11 people go quiet and look at his mouth. You'd not talk either. She wiped her hands on her apron. In my shed, nobody wanted anything off him. That's the whole of it. You think it will come? I think it'll come when it's got somewhere to go and nobody's watching for it. She looked over at him, and her face did the thing it did, the thing that had undone me in the wax shed. And I think if I say that too loud, it won't. Then we won't say it loud. She nodded slowly. Then ask your question. What question? You've had one in your mouth since the orchard. She sat down on the hearthstone with her back against the warm brick, tired to the bone and not hiding it. You've been standing in doorways for 4 days looking at me like a man doing sums. Ask it, and then I can stop wondering. So I asked her the wrong one, because I was a coward in a smaller way than usual. When you speak, I said, I know the word before you say it, half a beat. It began at the gate the first time you opened your mouth to me, and it has not stopped. I made myself hold her eyes. I've felt it once before in my life. My mother had it with my father. It has a name, and I think you know the name. The fire ticked. I'm a honey keeper from a valley that raised the wrong banners, she said. That is not an answer to what I said. No, she put her head back against the brick and shut her eyes. No, it isn't. Eloan. Don't, she said it gently. You'll say it and then it'll be said, and then it's in the room for 11 days while your council decides what to do with a child, and I'd be no use to anybody. I know what I am, my king. I've known since the wax shed near enough. You're not the only one who's been going half a beat ahead. She opened her eyes. And I'd rather it waited, not because I don't want it. Because I do, and because that boy hasn't got room in him for anything but himself just now. And if I let myself think about you, I'll do him badly. I have been obeyed all my life by men who were afraid of me. I had never once been refused by someone doing it for a better reason than mine. After the long night, I said. After the long night, she agreed. If you still want to say it in front of a hall full of Karn riders and that warden of yours, you can say it then, and I'll answer you like a grown woman. A pause. And if you decide by then that a king can't, I'll go back down my road and I'll not make a scene about it, and you'll have had 11 days of decent candles out of me. You think I'd do that? I think you're a man with 41 names on a stone in his yard, she said. I think you'd do a great many things you'd hate to keep it at 41. She was right, and I hated it, and I have never respected anyone more in my life. I got up. At the door I stopped. For the record, I said, I have not once in 11 days thought of you as the Ashby woman from Larrowfield. Not once, in my own head. Kit has said it 11 times, and every time he says it, I have to remember who he means. She laughed at that, the second time I ever heard it, and told me to send Ronald for the boy and to go to bed, and to stop standing in doorways because it frightened the kitchen girls. My wolf came back to me on the 6th night. Not all at once. I had gone down to the yard, to the stone, the way I did when I could not sleep, and the snow had stopped and the sky had come out hard and black with that scatter of stars you only get in the deep cold, and I stood in front of 41 names and did what I had done 100 times, opened my hands at my sides and reached for him. And he was there, right up against the inside of my ribs, awake, breathing, close as a horse in a stall. He did not come out. He did not shift me. He simply came and stood where he had not stood since Thistlegate, and I made a sound in that empty yard I would not care to have repeated, and I put my hand flat on the top of that stone, and I stood there in the cold for a long time. I understood it perfectly well. A wolf goes where there is something to guard. For 2 years I had been a king with a kingdom, which is not the same as having anything to guard at all. And now there was a woman at a trestle in my east kitchen who had walked up my road twice, and a boy asleep against her folded cloak, and my wolf had gone and stood in front of them and come back into me by the same door. I told nobody. Ronald guessed because Ronald has known me since we were both too young to be trusted with horses, and all he said was, "You're standing different," and I said, "Am I?" and he said, "You are." Good, and that was the whole of it. The mark came on the 9th day, in the worst possible hour. The Cairn escort arrived at noon, 19 riders, exactly as Kit had said, under Warden Hal de Kern, a broad, gray, entirely humorless woman who had fought against my father and with me and had never once pretended to like either arrangement. She came into my hall with the snow still on her, looked at the boy on the stair, looked at me and said, "Well, he's small. He's 4. They're all 4 when you take them," she said. "That's the point of it. My king, I'll be plain with you because I've ridden 9 days and I've no charm left. I don't want your child. My packs want a knot they can see. If you've something better to offer than a boy, offer it, and offer it in the hall in front of my 19, because if I go home with nothing I'll be fighting my own council by spring." That was more honesty than I had had from my own table in a fortnight, and it changed the whole shape of what I meant to do at the long night, and I had 1 night to build it. I went to find a Lowen because I wanted to say it out loud to someone who would tell me if it was foolish. She was in the passage outside the east kitchen with a pail in each hand, and Kit was standing in her way. I heard the last of it before either of them saw me. "Only that you should understand the position you are being put in, mistress," Kit was saying, in that beautiful, reasonable voice. "You are a valley woman with no family standing and no protection, and in 2 days' time your name will be spoken in front of 19 Cairn riders and a full council. Not kindly. Whatever you imagine is happening here, it will be described in that hall as something squalid, and the describing will stick to you long after it stops sticking to him. He will still be king. You will still have to sell honey to people who heard it." A pause. "I am not threatening you. I am telling you the price, because nobody else in this hold will, and because I do not enjoy watching people walk into things." "That's kind of you," she said. "It is not kind at all. It is arithmetic." "Then here's mine, First Warden." She set both pails down, unhurried. "I'm 41 years old. I've buried my mother and my trade's been half ruined twice, and I've fed 9 hives through a winter when I had food for 4. I know exactly what people say about a woman like me in a hall like yours, and I've heard most of it already at the Larrow Fair with my own crocks in front of me." She picked the pails back up. "You've mistaken me for someone who's climbing, sir. I'm not climbing. I'm standing where a child put me." And then she went past him and saw me in the passage, and her face did not change at all, and she said, "My king, mind the wet floor," and carried her pails through and left the 2 of us standing there. Kit recovered first. "My king." "Say it in front of me next time," I said. every word of it in front of me. And First Warden, you were right about the arithmetic. You were wrong about the woman. Take the lesson. He bowed and left, and I stood in that passage and found I was breathing hard, and I went after her into the kitchen, and she was at the trestle with her back to me and her hands flat on the wood, not moving. Eloan. Don't, her voice had gone, she cleared it. Don't be gentle with me for a minute, I'll fall over. He'll not speak to you again, that I can promise. He wasn't wrong. She turned round and her eyes were bright and furious. That's the thing of it, my king. He wasn't wrong, he just said it like a ledger. He was wrong about one line of it, I said. He said you were unprotected. I am. You are not. And she looked up at me, and I watched her open her mouth, and I knew the word half a beat before it came, and this time so did she, and neither of us said it, and the mark came up between us like a coal breathed on. Hers first, a line of pale gold that opened across the back of her right hand from the wrist, thin as a scribe's stroke and branched twice, 3 times the way a comb branches when the bees build it free. She made a small sound and turned her hand over and stared at it. Mine came in the same breath, the same place, the same shape, warm as a hand held to a fire. We stood there in a kitchen that smelled of wax and looked at our own hands like a pair of fools. Well, she said unsteadily. That's answered that. It has. It's very pretty. She turned her hand in the light and laughed and pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth, and I saw her eyes go bright over it. It's a comb. Dane, it's a comb, look at it, it's built like a wild comb. It was the first time she had used my name. I have been called a great many things by a great many people. Nothing has ever gone through me like that. Eloan, I said, I'm going to say it now, and you can answer me after the long night, exactly as you asked. But I'm saying it while it's mine to say, and not in a hall in front of 19 riders where it can be made into a maneuver. Then say it. You're my mate, I said. You have been since you opened your mouth at my gate, and I already knew the word. I'd have known you in any market in the world. I turned you out into the snow twice, and you came back up my road for a child who wasn't yours, and there is nothing in my whole reign I am less proud of and nothing I am more grateful for. I had to stop. That's all of it. It'll keep till the long night. She stood very still. Then she took my hand, the marked one, and turned it over and put her palm flat against it, gold on gold, and shut her eyes, and neither of us said anything at all for a while, and the fire went on ticking. After the long night, she said at last, unsteady, 2 days. I want to say it properly, and I want the boy settled first, and I want, she gave a wet laugh, I want to not be holding 2 pails when the king of the Hykeld tells me that. You put the pails down. I did not. You did, I watched you. Well, that was for Kit. She wiped her face briskly with her wrist. Go away, my king. I've 40 candles to draw before morning, and I can't do it with you standing in my light. I went away. Ronald caught me on the stair with his face set wrong. He had been doing what I had told him to do 6 days earlier, and had half forgotten I had told him, going quietly through the clerk's room, because a thought had lodged in me in the lower yard and would not come out. He wrote the writ before he asked me. The surety writ, Ronald said. The one Kit drew for the Carn. What of it? It's dated. He handed it to me, a fair copy, the clerk's hand small and neat, the date in the margin the way the Hykeld clerks have always done it. Look at the day, Dane. I looked at the day. It was 8 days before the Carn terms had come over the pass. He had written the answer before the question had been asked, which meant the question had not come from the north at all. Get me the courier book, I said. Every rider Kit has sent over the pass since harvest, and Ronald go quietly and go now, because that council sits at sundown tomorrow. The courier book took Ronald until the small hours, and what it gave us was not a confession. It was a shape. 9 riders sent north over the pass since harvest, all under the first warden's seal, all entered as revenue correspondents. The Karn packs do not pay the Highkeld revenue. 3 of the 9 had gone out in the fortnight before the Karn terms came down, and one of those had been carried by a clerk named Aldis Ray, who had come back with a horse he had not left with, and had told the stable men a long story about it. "It's not proof," Ronald said. "He'll say he was sounding them out. He'll say a first warden's job is to know what's coming before it comes." "It isn't proof," I agreed. "It's a door. Have the clerk in the passage behind the dais at sundown and keep him away from Kit entirely." "And if he won't speak?" "He'll speak," I said. "He's a clerk. Clerks are frightened of the wrong things." The long night hall was full an hour before the bell. 19 Karn riders down the left of it with Hal de Kern at their head, my own council along the right, the Valley Reeves at the back, and every servant in the Highkeld crushed into the doorways because there is no keeping a thing like that quiet. They had lit the whole of the west wall with candles. Eloin's candles, as it happened, 4 days of her work, burning over the heads of the people who had spent that fortnight talking about her. She came in with the kitchen women and stood where she had said she would stand, at the back, near the passage, not at any high table. She had the boy's hand. I had asked her one thing that morning. "When he's called," I had said, "let go of him. He'll not walk out there alone. He might, I need him to be able to." I had crouched to look him in the face, and he had looked back at me with that grave clerk stare. "Avon, tonight a lot of people are going to talk about you. You don't have to do anything at all. If you want to go back to the kitchen at any point, you go. Ronald will take you and nobody will stop you." I had put my hand on his head. "Nobody is going to take you anywhere you don't go with me. Do you understand me?" He had looked at me for a long moment. Then he had reached up and put his hand flat against my jaw, the way she did to him when he got worked up, and patted it twice. I nearly did not get through the council after that. Hal de Kern spoke first, and she spoke well and briefly, which is the northern manner. The peace of 9 years. The valley's quiet but not settled. Halric Bray's banners folded but not burned. Her packs wanted a knot they could see, and the boy was the knot that had been proposed to them. "Proposed to you by whom?" I said. The hall went very still, because that is not a question you ask in the middle of a treaty. Kern's eyes went narrow. "The terms came from my council, my king." "They did. I'm not disputing that. I'm asking who put the boy into your council's mouth." "Does it matter?" "It's about to," I said. "Bear with me a moment, Warden." First Warden Kit read out the surety writ. Kit rose smoothly. He had it in his hand. Of course he had it in his hand. He read it in that beautiful voice, all the way through, the fostering, the terms of it, the years, the boy's name written out in full with his father's after it, Avon, son of Halric Bray, and it landed in that hall exactly as a thing like that lands, and I heard the noise go through the servants in the doorway. "Thank you," I said. "Read the date." A pause of about a heartbeat and a half. In a man like Kit, that is a scream. "The 11th of the frost month," he said. "And when did the Karn terms come over the pass?" "Warden Kern, your own riders carried them." "What day did they leave you?" Kern did not answer at once. She was ahead of me by then. She is not a stupid woman. "The 19th, she said. 8 days after my first warden had already drawn the writ granting them. I let that sit in the hall for a while. I have had my captain in the courier book since yesterday. 9 riders north under the warden's seal since harvest, entered as revenue. The Karn packs don't pay me revenue." I turned. "Ronald, bring in the clerk." They brought Aldis Ray out of the passage behind the dais, and he was gray before he was through the door. And he did what I had said he would do, because he was a careful man who had been asked to be a brave one and had never once been paid for it. He had carried a letter to the Karn steward's house in the last week of harvest, not sealed as revenue, sealed private. He had waited 2 days for a reply and been given a horse and a purse for his trouble, and he had been told by the first warden's own mouth that the matter was the king's business and not to be entered in the book. "And what did you understand it to be about?" I asked him. I don't read what I carry, my king. I know you don't. What did you understand it to be about? He looked at the floor. The warden asked me before I went whether the northern lords were the sort who'd take a child, he said. I said I couldn't say, my lord. He said no, of course, and then he said, they will if they're told it was their own idea. The hall did not erupt. That is not how it goes in a room like that. It simply changed temperature. Halda Kern turned very slowly in her place and looked at Ambrose Kit with an expression I would not have wanted turned on me. My counsel was played, she said. Your counsel was handed a demand it would never have thought of, I said, so that I could be made to grant it. And I would have granted it, warden. That's the part I'll be living with. 2 days ago I had no better answer than his, and I'd have signed. Kit stood up. I will give him this, and then I will give him nothing else. He did not lie, and he did not run. He stood in front of a hall that had turned to stone, and he answered me in that same beautiful, unhurried voice, and what came out of him was the most sincere thing I ever heard him say. Every word of that is true, he said. I did it. I would do it again. Somebody down the council table said his name in horror. He ignored them entirely. King, you cannot see this because you have to sleep in the same house as that child. I can. In 9 years he is 13, and there will be a bad harvest, and somebody in the low valleys will remember that Howrick Bray's son is being raised at the king's own hearth like a prince, and they will put a banner in his hand, and you will have to kill him. His voice did not rise. That was the worst of it. I have served 3 of your house. I stood in this hall and read out the names for that stone in your yard, 41. I could not do it again, and I could not watch you become a man who has to hang a boy he raised. So I took the choice away from you and gave it to the north, where it could be done cleanly and by somebody else. He inclined his head. It was a disgraceful thing done for a decent reason. I am aware of how that sounds. It is still what I would do again. It is what you have done to a 4-year-old, I said. Yes, said Kit. And in 9 years you would have thanked me, and neither of us would have said so out loud. And the terrible thing, the thing I have turned over on 100 nights since, is that there is a version of this reign in which he was right. First warden, I said, you're relieved of the seal, and you'll answer to this council for a private treaty made under a false hand. Sit down. My king. Sit down, Ambrose. He sat. Halda Kern got to her feet. Well, she said into the ringing quiet, then I am back where I started, and I would like to be plain in front of everyone here because I have been made a fool of once tonight already. My packs still need a knot. I don't want your ward. I never wanted your ward. But I cannot go north with a story about a wicked warden, my king. I need a thing. Give me a thing. I mean to, I said. Bring the boy forward. Eloin's face at the back of that hall. I have it still. She had gone white to the lips, and she looked at me the way you look at a man on a roof, and I held her eye across 150 people and hoped to the moon she could read what I meant, because I could hardly stand there and shout it. Then she let go of his hand. He came out through the middle of that hall by himself. 4 years old in the good coat the old woman had made him, past the Carn riders and the council and the reeves, small as a lamp on all that stone, and he stopped in front of the dais and looked up at me, entirely composed, entirely quiet. I came down off the dais and knelt in front of him so we were level, which caused a certain amount of noise on both sides of the hall, and I did not care about that then, and I care about it less now. They're going to hear this from me and not from a writ, I said to him, not loudly, though the hall heard every word because the hall was holding its breath. Avon, your father raised his banners against me, and he died at Thistlegate, and I was the man he died fighting. You'll be told that one day by somebody unkind, so you'll have it from me first tonight in front of everyone, and you'll never have to find it out. His hand came up and took hold of my collar. He did that when the room got large. And I'm not sending you north, I said. Not this winter, not in 9 years, not ever. You're not a surety, and you're not a claim, and you're not your father's banner. You're my ward, and if you'll have it, you're my son, and the man who wanted to trade you is sitting down there with no seal on him." I put my hand over his on my collar. "That's my answer, Warden Kern. And here's your knot, since you asked me plainly, and I'll answer plainly. I'll not give you a child, but I'll give you my heir. If I have blood of my own, the eldest fosters north at 7 in your own hall, under your own eye, and by the same writ your counsel can hold me to. My blood, not braze, mine to give and mine to lose." There was a great deal of noise then. Kern stood in the middle of it, looking as though somebody had handed her a live coal, which, in fairness, I had. "That is a considerably better knot," she said at last, "and you have no heir, my king, so it costs you nothing tonight and everything later, which is the only kind of promise I've ever trusted." She looked down the hall, right down the length of it, to the back, where a honey-keeper stood by the kitchen passage with her marked hand pressed flat against her skirt. Kern had good eyes. "Though I'd say your arithmetic has changed lately." "It has." "Then my 19 will want to hear it said in front of them, and so will your valleys." She sat back down. "It's a hall, my king, use it." And I could not answer her, because Avon had turned round. He had let go of my collar and turned, still standing between my knees, and he was looking down that hall at the back of it, at the woman by the passage door, with an expression I had never once seen on him, not solemn, not careful, impatient. And he said, "Eloan." It came out of him hoarse and cracked and far too loud, the way a voice does when it has not been used in 2 years, and it went up into the roof of that hall and hung there. Nobody moved. I could not have told you my own name. He said it again, better the second time, steadier, and with the plain irritation of a child who has already said a thing once and does not see why the adults are all standing about, and then he pulled out of my hands and ran. She got down on her knees on the flagstones before he was halfway. He hit her at a dead run, and she folded over the top of him and made a sound that I will not attempt to write down, and the whole of that hall, Carn riders, council, Reeves, kitchen women, the doorway 3 deep, went up at once, and Halda Kern of the North was on her feet hammering the table with the flat of her hand like a woman at a horse fair. And into all of that noise, quite clearly, my ward said her name a 3rd time, and then, in the tone of a small king granting an audience, "Come on." She carried him back up the hall herself. She did not ask anybody's leave, and nobody was fool enough to offer any. She came the whole length of that room with him on her hip and his arms round her neck, and she stopped at the foot of the dais and did not curtsy, because her hands were full. "My king," she said, wrecked, "he wants the honey. He's been asking me for the honey since the 3rd day, and I couldn't hear him." "Eloan." "I couldn't hear him, Dane." "You were the only one who ever did," I said, and I said the rest of it there, in front of 19 Carn riders and my whole council and every servant in the Heikeld, exactly as she had once said I would have to. "This is Eloan Ashby of Larrowfield," I said to that hall. "She kept bees through a winter that ruined her. She walked up my road twice in the snow, and I turned her out twice, and she came anyway, because a woman put a child in her arms at a market, and she has never once put him down since, not in 2 years, not in her own head. She is my mate. The mark came the day before yesterday in my east kitchen, and I have it here for anyone who wants to see it." I held up my hand, and the gold ran up it, branched like wild comb. "There are men in this hall who have called her the Valley Woman. You'll not do it twice." Then I turned to her, and the noise died right down, because I think everyone there could see what was coming and wanted it more than they wanted to be loud. "You said you'd answer me after the long night," I said. "It's after. I'm not going to command you in front of a hall, and if the answer's no, you'll walk out of that door tonight with a cart and my thanks, and nobody will say a word to you. Eloan, will you have us?" She looked at me with the boy's face buried in her neck. "You great fool," she said. "I've had you since the wax shed." I do not remember getting down off that dais. We were married in the orchard at Larrowfield in the thaw, because she would not be married in the hall, and because she said the bees ought to be able to see it, and I had learned by then not to argue with her about the bees. Half the valley came. Half the Heikeld came down the switchback road on foot in the mud, which is 4 miles, and nobody complained about it in my hearing. Avon talked the entire way through the ceremony. That is not an exaggeration, and it is not an ornament. 2 years of silence came out of that child over a single spring like water out of a burst pipe, and most of it was questions, and a great deal of it was about bees. And by midsummer, there were mornings when Ronald would look at me across the yard with the particular grimness of a man who has been asked 40 times why the drones do not work. Halda Kern held me to my writ, as I knew she would. Our daughter goes north at 7 to her hall, under her own eye. Eloin made me read the terms aloud to her twice, and then said that 7 was too young and that she would be going north with her, and Kern wrote back that the Heikeld had evidently sent them a queen and not a mate, and that she was welcome to come, and to bring honey. Ambrose Kit lived out his life in a stone house on the North Road with his ledgers and his beautiful voice, and I never took a letter from him, and never once found him wholly out of my mind. He was wrong. I have to say that plainly, because there are nights when the low valleys are restless, and I feel his arithmetic sitting up in me like an old wound. He was wrong, and the proof of it is a boy who is 9 now, and who came into my study last winter to tell me, carefully, having clearly rehearsed it, that he had decided he did not want the Larrow banners when he was grown, and would rather have the orchards, and could that be arranged? I said it could be arranged. My wolf runs the ridge above Larrowfield most evenings in the summer, which the shepherds have got used to. He came back to me the night I understood there was something in the world I was frightened of losing, and I have never mistaken that for coincidence. And on the first cold night of every autumn, when the hives are wrapped and the crocks are stacked in the wax shed, and the boy has been sent up to bed 4 times and come down 3, my wife sits on the hearthstone with her back against the warm brick and her marked hand open on her knee, and I sit at the end of the bench where I sat that first night, and neither of us says very much. She held him for 1 hour. That is all it was. 1 hour behind a market stall in the mud in the dark, singing badly. Everything I have because a woman would not put a child down.